Welcome and thank you for joining us today on Level Up Law, where we here at South Carolina Legal Services are leveling up your legal knowledge on the different areas of law that we practice in. I'm Susan Ingalls, Senior Staff Attorney with South Carolina Legal Services, and I'll serve as the moderator today. We are joined by South Carolina Legal Services Attorney Kirby Mitchell, the Legal Director of our Medical Legal Partnership with Furman University and Prisma Health. I want you to please note that this webinar is being recorded. The recording and slides will be posted on our YouTube channel for South Carolina Legal Services later on this week. We do ask that you keep in mind that this is general information for the public and there won't be any legal advice. Obviously, you should consult with an attorney for any specific legal issues that you have. Now, during the presentation, all the attendees will be in listen-only mode, but you can put questions in the question box, and we certainly invite you to do that. Also, feel free to put comments in the chat box, which is also open. Our presenter cannot answer questions specific to your situation, but he can give general information that may be helpful to you. Again, thanks for joining us. And Kirby, you have the floor.
All right, thank you, Susie. Appreciate the invitation today. I want to introduce to our audience something that I've gotten really involved in the last few years. I've been a legal aid attorney in South Carolina for a couple decades, but the last 3 or 4 years or so, I've focused my practice in what we call our medical legal partnership. So today's goal is just to explain why a medical legal partnership, why I think this is such a wonderful thing and really could be developed much more extensively all through South Carolina, as it really has been throughout the country over the last 25 years. Number two, I want to tell you what an MLP is exactly, and we'll talk a lot about the one we have here in Greenville, South Carolina, in the Upstate, but there's certainly quite a diversity of medical legal partnerships. I would say it's more of an approach than one specific model. And then just the last thing, talk to you a little bit about how MLP can improve health. We have some really good examples, really good data and evidence over the last couple decades in this country about how that works. So what determines health? This is a slide that I've seen in several medical presentations. I like to use this slide when I talk to the medical students here in Greenville because it's a nice, humbling start. You know, I say to them, we focus on you, the future doctors. The people in white coats, of course, are greatly respected and valued in our country and looked to improve health. But you doctors, you are only ever 20% of the equation. They don't love to hear that, perhaps, particularly from a lawyer. But it just makes the point that I think all of us know and just from experience realize that certainly the healthcare you receive is a big percentage of how healthy you are and what determines your health. But we think that's probably about 20% when you look at a whole society. Certainly genetics are important. I was wise and chose my parents well. So had good genes in many ways and was not born with disabilities or anything that was a barrier, immediate barrier to my health relative to many people. So yeah, that's super critical. And of course, genetics is a developing field of remarkable development and growth in this country, but it's only probably another 20%. So the majority of what determines your health, it's everything else, what you eat, the environment, where you were born, your zip code, teachers, doctors, lawyers, police officers, all kinds of things that affect someone's health, just the social determinants of health, the social environment. So the four walls of the hospital, certainly there's certain medical needs that should be handled there and are well handled there. But perhaps the majority and in a large sense, the biggest part of our health is determined outside of the four walls of the hospital. And so legal aid lawyers, civil legal aid attorneys, which is what what I am, we can be very helpful in improving health. I'll give you a slide that another medical legal partnership director uses. Take a look at this. This is a common scenario. Anyone with kids has probably had an ear infection or something like an ear infection. So what do you do in that scenario? Of course, you focus on the problem in front of you. It appears to be a medical problem, so you correctly go to a pediatrician or a ear, nose, and throat specialist. So in this cartoon here, we have that doctor who has been trained to look for specific things that this doctor is focused on. That's their sphere of expertise. So you have the doctor here looking into the child's ear and using medications, using procedures, using medical knowledge, using medical tests. This medical problem is addressed. So here the doctor says, yay, you know, I did my thing. This ear is better. Anything else? And you can see in the cartoon all the burdens and other issues, the social determinants of health on this particular parent. And so certainly for the low income and vulnerable and underserved populations that legal aid serves, these are recurring issues where that ear infection certainly is a medical problem, but it may be downstream and part of a lot of other issues that mom in this cartoon is dealing with. Let's leave cartoons aside for a minute and talk about a real case. We started our medical legal partnership in Greenville in October of 2016. This was one of the first cases that came to me from our health partner, Prisma Health here in Greenville. That's a picture of the mom, Kiasha Brown, and her, at that point, 1-year-old daughter, Breasia. Breasia has a condition called cystic fibrosis, something I knew nothing about. The pulmonologist and doctor at Prisma Health that referred the case is a specialist and an expert in this. It's a delay that the lungs not to fully develop appropriately. It can be something that is an irritant for someone through their life if they get good care and don't have an extreme case. It can be a seriously disabling and life-altering condition at the other end of the spectrum for certain people who don't get good care or have an extreme case. So like a lot of chronic illnesses that affect our low-income citizens in South Carolina, getting early access to health care is critical for a condition like this. Breasia was not sleeping well. She was having coughing attacks and breathing difficulty in the night. Her mom had to call 911 many times and make the 37-mile trip from Hania Path up to the pulmonologist in Greenville at Prisma Health. When the child was brought to the hospital, once she got inside the 4 walls of the hospital and was seeing a specialist, her health would improve quickly. They have excellent medications, excellent technology, wonderful doctors and nurses. She would get better. She would return home and have the same problem. So you can probably imagine the issue was a social determinant of health. It was the environment she was living in. I went down to the apartment after this wonderful pulmonologist said, hey, you know, I can continue to treat medically what is presenting as a medical problem. But having heard about our new medical legal partnership, this doctor thought, let me see if this legal aid lawyer can do anything to address this. It sounds like there may be some issues in the apartment. Sure enough, we were able to identify mold and toxic mold very quickly. We were able to contact the landlord, and after a bit of confrontational back and forth, was that we were able to create a much better environment, which you can see in this photograph. That's a picture I took. You can see Breasia is reaching for my iPhone there, but that's the new tile in the new apartment. We were able to get a legal accommodation, get an improvement, get what is something this client is entitled to under her lease, a habitable apartment. So that's an early example of why sometimes what presents as a medical problem actually has, as part of the solution, the need for an attorney, the need for a civil legal aid lawyer. So keep that in mind as we press through discussing what an MLP is. That's the why. A lot of things that present or end up at our safety net hospitals can be improved or entirely remedied through the actions of an attorney. So that's the why we looked into starting a medical legal partnership. What is an MLP? Simply put, you take a safety net hospital, you take a what's sometimes referred to as a public hospital that sees all kinds of cases, people that have insurance or no insurance or any need for care, and you take a civil legal aid lawyer, someone like me. You see here, I've got this badge. You embed the lawyer directly into the health system. So you have the lawyer, sometimes paralegals, social workers, support staff, working as a team with the doctors and physicians embedded in the medical facility. And the goal is to identify, kind of like happened with Kiasha's case, you identify what we call health harming civil legal barriers or civil legal needs. So things that a legal aid lawyer can do, a street lawyer is good at so many things for low income people, and often it has an immediate impact on health. That's what an MLP is. The first one was started in Boston in 1993. Dr. Barry Zuckerman, who I was fortunate to meet, who came to visit Greenville this February. It's fantastic, but he was sort of the father of the MLP approach. It's spread across the country now in 48 states. You've got 442 healthcare institutions of some kind participating in a medical legal partnership. And there's remarkable diversity. If you get to know one MLP, you really know one MLP. I find it really exciting. If you go to the National MLP Center, they have a fantastic website that kind of outlines all the different possibilities. There's hospitals, there's VA clinics, there's free medical clinics, there's emergency rooms, there's specialty practices, there's lots of law schools involved, many of the best in the country, lots of medical schools involved as partners, sometimes nursing schools, a lot of pro bono programs, private attorneys involved with MLPs, as well as legal aid offices. So just know that you're going to hear today about what we've got started in Greenville, South Carolina, and the Upstate. But there's really fascinating diversity across the country in the medical legal partnership community. And here's another fascinating diverse element. Some MLPs focus with a department of a hospital. For example, in Greenville, we started in behavioral pediatrics and then expanded into geriatrics. I'll talk about that a little bit later, why. We kind of matched where our medical partner was organized through these departments. And that's common across the country. But some MLPs focus on a condition. For example, there are some MLPs that address diabetes and the health harming civil legal needs of diabetics. So that cuts across all age, gender, socioeconomic group. They focus on a condition. There are some that help cancer patients and cancer survivors. Some MLPs focus instead on a discrete and underserved population. For example, HIV positive patients in Washington, D.C. are served by a fantastic MLP, the Walker Whitman Center. Some focus on veterans. They're a very much underserved group that have a lot of medical and legal needs that intersect. Some of the best MLPs in the country focus on money. They focus on what they call the Medicaid recovery funds, making services that the hospital is not getting paid to do, something that's funded. They are able to appeal a lot of Medicaid denials or get people coverage that don't have coverage. That's a wonderful way to use the skills of legal aid attorneys and paralegals and advocates who are really good at public benefits, VA, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. And as I tell my Furman students, this last picture here on this screen, that's not a bong that child has. That's an asthma inhaler. lots of kids with asthma. We find across the country that's a really valuable partnership for the hospital, the pulmonologist, kind of like the one case example I gave you. Asthma is often triggered and exacerbated by the environment and by rental units that have mold or bed bugs or lead or all kinds of environmental contaminants. Legal aid lawyers can be incredibly helpful to kids as their lungs develop in those environments. So here in Greenville, the three partners of our MLP, you have legal aid, you have lawyers like me, you have Prisma Health. When we started our medical legal partnership, it was here in Greenville, the Greenville Health System, and then they merged in 2019 with Palmetto Health in the Midlands. So now that's known as Prisma Health, and it covers about 2/3 of South Carolina. And unique among the 380 or so medical legal partnerships in the United States, our MLP has an undergraduate education partner. A lot of the other, I would say the majority of medical legal partnerships in the US partner with a law school or a medical school. For example, the second MLP here in South Carolina, which is in Columbia, fantastic organization known as CHAMPS, led by Emily Susky. That is based right there at the University of South Carolina Law School. That's very common. And we have some collaboration with that MLP. But in Greenville, we have the only MLP that has an undergraduate liberal arts school as the partner. So the Furman students are fantastic, and they help us quite a bit directly with the legal work and a lot of the supplemental work, the intakes, and the reporting that we do. So how do the three partners work together? It's a challenge. I would sometimes say it's like a doctor, a lawyer, and a PhD walked into a bar. You know, these are three very different professions. Traditionally, they've been siloed from one another. Lawyers and doctors and educational professionals and professors tend not to mix directly to try to benefit clients the way we do. Certainly, Prisma Health provides the medical knowledge and facilities, the legal aid lawyers at legal aid with the assistance of some pro bono attorneys. We provide the legal know-how, expertise, and access. And really the Furman students, these are wonderful students that often want to go to medical school or want to go to law school. So they're getting kind of an advantage, an early look at these professions and how they might work differently 15, 20, 25 years from now as this approach develops and shows its value. It's wonderful to be part of the team at Prisma Health. Here's an example, this slide, what we call the Toolkit. I let the doctors call me a tool. They like that. They like that idea that, listen, they have x-rays they can order, they have tests, you know, they can do examinations, they have medications. But sometimes to really solve the problem, you need an attorney, you need a social worker, you need a paralegal, you need someone who can file a lawsuit, who can get a restraining order. All kinds of cases come in, and we ask the doctors and medical professionals and primary care providers, we ask them to just identify health harming civil legal needs. They don't need to be legal experts. Certainly there's a lot of bi-directional education that goes on in our MLP. The medical professionals are educating us, and the lawyers, I'm often presenting or talking to the medical staff about legal concepts. But we just ask, with all the demands on the time of doctors, we ask them to just identify the problem. Say, for example, a utility shut off. They learn that power has been shut off in a patient's house. You know, we don't want the doctor to have to decide, gosh, is that because of a utility subsidy that wasn't properly applied by a landlord? Did they just not pay it? Was this wrongfully cut off by the energy provider? We just ask them, identify it and refer it to us. And then through what we call the Toolkit, we have wonderful medical legal partnership coordinators who look at it, analyze it, talk to the patient, and see, is this something that should go to a lawyer? Is this something that should be handled by another community resource? So that's the wonderful triage that helps us work at the top of our license. That's a phrase that the hospital likes. So the doctors are doing what really the doctor was licensed to do. The lawyer is doing issues that really require an attorney, and anything that can be handled by another professional, it's sorted through that pediatric support service. We're trying to develop something similar for our growing number of geriatric cases, but it's a fantastic model that the Prisma Children's Hospital developed. So what types of cases are MLPs doing? It's really exactly the same as what other civil legal aid offices and nonprofits are doing. Same stuff. No criminal cases, but all the other things that the flotsam and jetsam that low-income folks have to deal with every day. Education cases, we've handled quite a few. Housing issues, certainly evictions are a huge issue today in South Carolina. Lots of family court problems and things that improve health, getting custody orders and adoptions and birth certificates sorted out. There's consumer cases. Our moderator today, Susan Ingalls, had a wonderful success recently for a medical legal partnership patient client. She can talk about that if we have time at the end, but that improved the health for the family that case was affecting. Lots of public benefits issues, Social Security appeals, SSI. That's really what drives a lot of Medicaid coverage, and so tons of cases there. Lots of things in probate court. We do quite a few guardianships and alternatives to guardianships. We try not to have the case immediately go to court if other remedies can solve the health harming civil legal needs. So sometimes advanced directives and other alternatives to guardianships can really solve the problem for the family. We try to do the minimum amount of disruption to the maximum benefit. So those many legal issues are neatly organized into an acronym by the National Center called iHelp. So there's kind of 5 categories, I would say. There's cases that involve income, housing, education and employment, lots of things regarding legal status, reentry issues, access to job expungement, things like that that really affect health quite a bit. If you have a job, you often then have at least some access to health care or health insurance, and we find that drives improving community health remarkably. And certainly personal and family stability. South Carolina, for example, has quite a bit of domestic violence that obviously is both a medical and a legal problem. So often we try to address these issues separately, but through the medical legal partnership, you have those providers working together to try to improve the health and stability for the family affected. So quickly, I mentioned that we got our MLP in Greenville going in kind of late 2016. There were 41 states at that point that had MLPs. So that was kind of, we kind of kicked the tires and tested it a little bit. The doctors at Prisma, particularly Dr. Nancy Powers and Des Kelly, were kind of leaders in, hey, let's try this. So we started with what they focused in, which was behavioral pediatrics. We had a lot of success there, so we expanded to the larger pediatrics practice. Dr. Carrie Cease and Robin LaCroix have been fantastic medical champions for us, and they certainly spread the word to a lot of their colleagues throughout South Carolina and the Southeast because they're leaders in pediatrics. We had a lot of success there and thought we can definitely help kids. We can help a lot of families with medical problems that their kids are facing. But another group that South Carolina Legal Services in particular is remarkable helping is seniors and vulnerable seniors and rural seniors. So we thought, let's try what we've developed in pediatrics. Let's see if it would work with the geriatrics population. We got a big grant thanks to Healthy Greenville, the Greenville Health Authority's philanthropy wing, and the fund there to get that started. That's been fantastic. I think the Duke Endowment saw what we were doing, and particularly with the development of a second medical legal partnership back in 2017 in Columbia, CHAMPS, we had the opportunity to collaborate, see if we could learn from one another. Certainly as our medical providers merged into Prisma, we had started separately. We kind of considered it like the Brady Bunch, you know, up here in Greenville, legal aid had partnered with GHS, Greenville Health System, and down there in Columbia, the law school had partnered with Palmetto Health. Well, our medical partners married, so we thought we don't want to merge and we don't want to collapse into one another, but I think we could learn from one another. And the Duke Endowment gave us a big grant to do that. So we're halfway through that collaboration, which has been fantastic. Just quickly, some updates. One of the best things that happened for our MLP was we got immediate access to Epic. The doctors and medical professionals that are identifying health harming legal needs and sending the cases to us, they don't have to fill out forms. There isn't a lot of paperwork. There isn't a fax machine. They are constantly on Epic, which is their electronic medical record and the largest medical case management system in the world. They have a drop-down box that goes right to our MLP coordinators. Fantastic. So the physicians love it. It saves them time, and they can focus on what they're good at and get these outside the four walls of the hospital issues, the social determinants issues, the legal issues. They can get those to us right away. We've expanded carefully, adding professionals as we've gone. We've got a paralegal, we've got coordinators, we have wonderful physicians that are involved with us. You know, Prisma is such a big part of the state that it isn't just the Greenville office that's handling cases. The legal aid office, SCLS in Spartanburg, has handled a wonderful job with MLP cases, as has our Greenwood office. And certainly we would love to see that expand as Prisma serves more of the state. The Greenville bar has been wonderful, kind of made this MLP a preferred partner early on with their pro bono efforts. So gotten a lot of help from private attorneys in some of these cases. We have multiple locations within Prisma, and slowly we're adding, as we have capacity, adding other departments and practices within Prisma where we think we can be effective. So how does it improve health? I know you're thinking, all right, I hear the why, and he's now explained what an MLP is, makes sense. Basically, it's a legal aid office embedded right in a public health facility. Does it work? Well, fortunately, we've had a couple decades of data from other parts of the country that have been real leaders in MLPs. Some of the MLPs are multi-million-dollar operations in New York and in Boston and in California. And they have had a lot of health economists and others really look at what they do. And you can go to the National Center's website for a lot of detail on these peer-reviewed and published studies. But I'll just say 5 things that are exhibited on this screen. One thing we see where an MLP gets involved, patients take their medications more often as prescribed. That is a huge improvement for low-income folks. And you can see that's probably because legal barriers and other issues, the funding for it, the insurance coverage, problems with employers, these are things that legal aid lawyers are good at addressing. So the doctors love it. They are prescribing prescriptions and medications, and when an MLP is involved, the data show they're taken more often as prescribed. More of the services are reimbursed. Our public health facilities are under massive financial pressure, particularly in 2020. And so MLPs, the involvement of MLPs, it actually helps the bottom line of medical providers. You see less money spent on healthcare. You also see reports of less stress. That's one metric that initially I didn't take too seriously. I thought, well, that's kind of a soft measure, but these physicians, particularly the pediatricians, have really convinced me that particularly in the first 6 years of life, your ACE scores and reports of stress on a child have a huge impact on the lifetime health. And so anything we can do to stabilize and support families, particularly with young children, it has a massive impact long-term and is a real investment. An iceberg is kind of an image we like with our MLP. Kind of, you can probably figure out what we're driving at. The doctor sees, what presents as a medical problem. Someone comes in complaining of a particular medical problem, and that doctor is to look for a medical solution to it. But once we have the involvement of social workers and lawyers and other professionals, we find what presents as that one medical problem, there's often multiple legal issues or health harming legal needs that we can address. It's been interesting to me how a case will be referred, for example, for child support or for an appeal of a disability claim or SSI for a child. And by the end of the case, we have found and addressed maybe 3 or 4 other health harming civil legal needs. Certainly was the case with the first example I gave you. Kiasha Brown was, again, someone I met in October of 2016, referred by a pulmonologist, which was Briage's doctor, for the serious breathing problems she was having. We have had a great relationship now for about 3.5 years, addressed a couple other legal needs that Kiasha has had. She's been able to continue with school, and she's missing less work in school. Her other child is missing less work in school than before. We've helped with other issues with the landlord, tried to help with applying for Habitat for Humanity and some family law issues. So that's just an example of, as we kind of demonstrate with the iceberg, that what the doctor may see initially can often lead to us addressing multiple other civil legal needs. So it's just been a fantastic model if you like the holistic approach and really trying to solve long-term problems through relationships with these families. I want to go ahead and stop, just really thank Susie for her support, inviting me today, but also her fantastic support of the Medical Legal Partnership. She has got her own wonderful practice at Legal Aid and is a really good mentor to a lot of lawyers, but it's really helped us, and I just appreciate that. Andrea Loney, our director, similarly has tried to help and get the MLP model known and appreciated across the state. So I just want to thank you all for having me today, and then I will be happy to stay and answer any questions. And certainly after today, would love to talk to anyone interested in learning more about the MLP. Certainly there's an MLP developing in Charleston. We've had interest from Anderson, Spartanburg, Florence, a little bit in Rock Hill, Lexington. There's a fantastic MLP there in Columbia called CHAMPS. So if you don't want to come talk to me about it, please find one of the medical or legal groups in the state that's really starting to show an interest in this approach.
Well, thanks so much, Kirby. One question that comes up is, how exactly does the referral of a patient happen? Is it just straight from the doctor because they notice something, or is it some other person in the procedure that happens when they go to the medical provider?
Good question. It kind of varies by the practice. We have a lot of champions of the MLP who have been through some of our trainings and have learned the types of cases we do, or a lot of them, frankly, have come from other parts of the country and they were very familiar with MLPs. They're kind of like, wait, what? You don't have this here? Or they've been to national conferences or regional conferences and they've heard about the fantastic results that partnering with civil legal aid lawyers can provide. So often it is someone within a practice, kind of depends how the hospital or the medical provider is organized. But we've had, for example, nurse practitioners or nurses kind of deputized by their doctor to help kind of screen for violence in the home or food insecurity or education issues with an IEP. It just really varies. So I think that's important to remember. There isn't one formula. You really need to get to know your medical partner. When I kind of started with this, I admit I kind of thought a doctor was a doctor was a doctor. I didn't know the difference between an MD and a DO, and I didn't realize how massive percentage of particularly our low-income clients, they never see a doctor. They often see a nurse practitioner, depending on their condition and what they have, or really. So I would just say it varies widely, as it should, and it really depends on the type of practice. If you have a cancer practice that you're partnered with, or a VA clinic, it's going to be very different from if you're dealing with children with autism in a behavioral pediatric setting or something like that. A free medical clinic will be very different. There'll be screeners and intake folks who will really kind of be your source. So I would say to you, the answer to that question is it varies widely. It varies widely within our MLP here in Greenville, and as it should, because you're going to have to communicate regularly with your medical partner.
Okay, and you mentioned, I think earlier, a case that I handled for a referral from the MLP, and I'll be glad to talk about that for just a minute because it was a great experience in which I was actually delighted to assist an older client who had dementia. And it just goes to show you, I think, how varied the cases can be. She was living on her own at the time, but was about to move, and she had been coerced into a loan that she couldn't afford to pay and probably didn't need. Still don't know exactly what the money was used for, but her family didn't really have any idea that she had gotten the loan until there were, of course, were some telltale signs. But then the loan company sued the client, and we had a mediation, which we often do in those kind of cases. And interestingly, although we explained the dementia issue to the loan company, they were really unwilling to accept the fact that this lady really didn't have the capacity to enter into a contract. And they were really, unwilling, although the offer was made, they were unwilling to take even the little bit of money that she could have squeezed out of her income to settle that case and not have a trial. So we had a trial. And at the trial, we were able to demonstrate that the client did not have the capacity to sign for the loan and understand, really what they were doing. So at the end of the trial, we made a motion that the case be dismissed, and the judge agreed, and the case was dismissed. And so I say that and I appreciate you letting me take a moment to share about that case, because this kind of thing happens quite a bit with the elderly folks. Even when they don't have dementia, they can really be coerced into doing something that they might not have done otherwise. And, debt collectors can be, they can harass you a lot, and it can be very stressful. And as you said earlier in your presentation, stress is a big issue on your health. And so I think that's something that lots of attorneys and healthcare providers in your MLP and MLPs around the country also, look at as cases. It's not the typical kind of case that you think about, but especially right now, we're seeing a lot of that, and certainly with the older folks, especially with scams. So anyway, yeah.
I would say, Susie, even if you don't want to jump into an MLP today, just realize if you're a legal aid lawyer or a funder of legal aid, this is where a remarkable amount of the referrals and access to low-income people can be in South Carolina. A lot of people have a long-term relationship with some health provider all across the state. That's very common. Pediatricians are wonderful resources for low-income people and really go to the wall to try to help people in really tough situations. And if you can make that connection and show them the value you have, kind of like you just discussed, Susie, with that case, they become our best advocates. You know, the irony is we think we're the advocates. I rarely give presentations like this today where it's just me. I usually try to present, and for example, tomorrow we'll be presenting to the residents and fellows at Prisma Health Pediatrics. I usually do it with doctors and usually with social workers or actual clients, because I want them to see the effects. And really our best advocates for the MLP, you know, Dr. Carrie Cease, for example, will often say, you know, I've been a successful pediatrician for quite a while. I don't want to do this anymore without Kirby. I don't want to practice community pediatrics without a legal aid lawyer. We just see how effective that is. He can be, you know, the most blunt sledgehammer where needed. You know, sometimes only a lawyer can get the response needed. He can be a fine instrument where that's called for in a particular case. But, you know, these doctors see how it improves health. And I've been a legal aid lawyer quite a while, like you have, and really enjoy it. I think it's a wonderful thing to do with your law license. I don't think I've ever done better work than the last couple of years. Just seeing how much more effective it is with the immediate access I have to medical professionals really benefits the patients and clients in a much more long-term way. So many examples of that. So I just hope that anyone out there, listen, there's good reason to be skeptical, and there's good reason that we have traditionally siloed and kept separate these professions. There are some ethical concerns. You have to carefully pick your client. There are some reporting issues and information sharing that has to be worked out, all kinds of HIPAA and confidentiality rules that you really got to think through carefully. The great benefit for us in South Carolina, there's been 20 years of folks in other states working hard on those issues, and you have a lot of really strong giants that you can stand on their shoulders and learn from. Certainly, Emily Suski here is a resource in South Carolina. She was, before she came to Columbia, she worked at an MLP in Virginia, and for a long time at a very successful MLP in Atlanta. So listen, this is something we can do successfully in South Carolina, but it's hard. The communication requirements, the constant making sure we understand what the other's doing, it's a challenge, but the benefit for our clients, well worth it.
Well, Kirby, thank you to you and our wonderful partners in this medical legal partnership. I want to thank you for that very informative presentation on not just how medical legal partnerships work in general, but specifically the workings of the MLP that South Carolina Legal Services is a partner in and a collaborator in. And I also thank all of you who are in attendance today. Level Up Law is a series of free legal events to educate the public on some of the most commonly faced legal challenges. We hope that you'll join us to learn the basics of a particular topic, as well as how to avoid pitfalls and to protect yourself. And this was a great presentation today on some of the ways that we can help people across the board in all kinds of legal situations. As a reminder, I do want to tell everyone, if you have an issue and need legal assistance or know someone who does, I encourage you to apply for help here at South Carolina Legal Services. You can see the information here on the screen. Our intake office personnel are always standing by at these hours, Monday through Thursday, 9 to 6. You can also apply online at lawhelp.org, where we also have many legal resources that are available to the public there on that website. The resources include all kinds of things: checklists, articles, brochures, videos, and even online classrooms on particular topics. And I just want to mention, because eviction is such an important issue right now in South Carolina, we even have an online classroom coming up on eviction. So we hope that will really help people. Again, here at Legal Services, we thank you for tuning in to Level Up Law, and we do hope you'll tune in again next Tuesday, when we will be talking about how to obtain a delayed birth certificate or name change, as well as the latest on getting your real ID. An easy way to see what's coming up each week is to check our Facebook page at SE Legal and check on the events. All of our upcoming events are listed there. And we look forward to having you back with us next week. And again, thank you, Kirby Mitchell.
Thank you, Cindy.
Director of our Medical Legal Partnership with Furman University and Prisma Health. Thanks, everyone, for joining in.